The baby's cries echoed across the dusty plains of New Mexico Territory, like a wounded coyote under the August sun. And when Matthew Young dismounted his horse to investigate the peculiar sound near his water well in 1878, he never imagined his entire world was about to change forever. The infant lay wrapped in a deerskin blanket decorated with intricate beadwork, tucked beneath the sparse shade of a juniper bush. Matthew knelt down, his weathered hands trembling as he picked up the child. A girl, maybe 3 or 4 months old, with thick black hair and bronze skin glistening with sweat. Her face was red from crying, and Matthew could tell she had been out here for hours, maybe longer. "Where's your mama, little one?" he whispered, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. Nothing but sagebrush and dust devils dancing in the afternoon heat. Matthew had been ranching alone on this patch of land outside Chloride for nearly 5 years, ever since his parents passed from fever. At 26, he had resigned himself to a solitary life, focusing on his cattle and the hard work required to survive in this unforgiving territory. But as he cradled the crying infant against his chest, something shifted in his heart. He carried her back to his modest ranch house, a sturdy adobe structure he had built with his own hands. Inside, he laid her on his bed and unwrapped the deerskin. She wore a simple cloth diaper and a small leather pouch around her neck containing what looked like sacred items: small stones, dried herbs, and a tiny carved figure. "You are loved," Matthew said softly, recognizing the craftsmanship of the items. "Someone cares about you deeply." The baby continued crying, and Matthew realized she must be starving. He had no milk, but he remembered his mother once telling him about sugar water for babies in emergencies. He mixed some water with a bit of sugar and soaked a clean cloth, then let the infant suckle on it. She took to it immediately, her tiny hands grasping his finger with surprising strength. For 3 days, Matthew cared for the child. He rode into Chloride and purchased canned milk from the general store, along with bottles and cloth for diapers. The storekeeper, an old-timer named Harold, raised his eyebrows at the purchases. "Found her on my land," Matthew explained simply. "Abandoned. You keeping her?" Harold asked. "Until I can find where she belongs," Matthew replied, though even then he felt a protective instinct growing stronger with each passing hour. He named her Hope, because that is what she represented to him. Each morning he would wake to her soft cooing, and each evening he would rock her to sleep while sitting on his porch, watching the sun paint the desert sky in shades of orange and purple. On the 4th day, Matthew was mending a fence when he heard horses approaching. Multiple horses. He turned to see at least 30 riders cresting the hill that bordered his property. His heart hammered in his chest as he recognized them as Apache, their horses decorated with traditional markings, the riders carrying weapons but not in an overtly threatening manner. Matthew walked slowly back toward his house, his hand instinctively moving to the rifle propped near his door. But something stopped him. These people were not here for violence. They were searching for something, for someone. A woman rode at the front of the group, flanked by what appeared to be the tribal leaders. She was young, perhaps 22 or 23, with long black hair braided with strips of leather and beads. Her face was beautiful but etched with exhaustion and desperation. She wore traditional Apache clothing, a deerskin dress decorated with intricate beadwork that matched the blanket he had found wrapped around Hope. The group stopped about 20 yards from his house. The woman slid from her horse with fluid grace, her eyes scanning his property with the intensity of a hunting hawk. When her gaze landed on the bundle of clean cloths hanging on his laundry line, cloths he had used for Hope's diapers, she let out a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. "My baby," she said in accented but clear English. "You have my baby." Matthew stood his ground, not out of hostility but uncertainty. "The child I found was alone, dying in the heat. I have been caring for her." An older man with gray streaking his long hair dismounted and walked forward. He wore the bearing of a chief, his face lined with age and wisdom. "I am Chief Nantage. This is my daughter, Onawa. 3 suns ago she was gathering plants for medicine when white men attacked. They scattered our hunting party. In the chaos, she hid her daughter to keep her safe from the bullets, planning to return when the danger passed. But the white men hunted her. She had to lead them away from her child. When she finally escaped and returned, the baby was gone. We have been searching ever since." Onawa stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. "Please, she is all I have. Her father was killed by the same men who hunt us. I thought hiding her would save her life. I thought I could come back quickly." Matthew saw the truth in her eyes, the anguish of a mother who had made an impossible choice. His chest tightened with empathy. "She is inside. She is safe and healthy." Onawa's knees nearly buckled with relief. Matthew turned and entered his house, emerging moments later with hope in his arms. The baby had been sleeping, but now her eyes opened, and when she saw Onawa, she made a small sound of recognition. Onawa rushed forward, and Matthew gently placed the infant in her mother's arms. The young woman collapsed to her knees, holding her daughter close, whispering words in Apache while tears flowed freely. The warriors behind her remained stoic, but Matthew could see the emotion in their eyes. This child was precious to all of them. Chief Nantage approached Matthew, studying him with intense dark eyes. "You cared for her. You did not leave her to die. You did not harm her." "I would never harm a child," Matthew said firmly. "When I found her, I saw that someone loved her. I was just keeping her safe until that someone could return." "Many white men would not have shown such kindness," the chief said. "Many would have left her to the desert or worse." Onawa stood, clutching hope to her chest, and approached Matthew. Up close, he could see the intelligence and strength in her eyes along with the exhaustion. She had not slept in days. "You fed her, changed her, kept her from the sun." She gestured to the cloths hanging outside, to the empty milk can near his door. "You spent your money and time on a child not your own." "She needed help," Matthew said simply. "I could not do anything less." Onawa stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand this white rancher who had saved her daughter's life. "I am Onawa Whitehorse. This is my daughter, Ada. I owe you a debt I can never repay." "You owe me nothing," Matthew replied. "I am just glad she is back with her mother." Chief Nantage spoke to the warriors in Apache, and several dismounted. They set up a temporary camp in the clearing near Matthew's house, clearly intending to stay at least for the night. Matthew was uncertain but not afraid. These people had come for a child, not for violence. As the sun began to set, Onawa approached Matthew where he sat on his porch. Ada was sleeping peacefully in her arms. "May I speak with you?" "Of course," Matthew said, gesturing to the empty chair beside him. She sat, adjusting Ada in her arms. "I need to understand. Why did you care for her? We are strangers to you. My people and your people, we are often enemies." Matthew was quiet for a moment, watching the warriors set up their camp. "My mother used to say that a person's character is shown in how they treat those who cannot help them in return. When I found Ada, I did not see an Apache baby or a white baby. I just saw a child who needed help. I have been alone on this land for 5 years. In that time, I have learned that survival out here requires decency. Without it, we are just animals." Onawa studied his face in the fading light. "You are not like other white men I have known." "I could say the same about you and your people," Matthew replied. Most of what I have heard about the Apache comes from men who profit from conflict. I have always suspected there was more to the story. There is always more to every story, Onawa said softly. She looked down at Ada, her expression tender. I was married to a warrior named Keel. He was brave and kind. He died defending our village from soldiers who came to force us onto a reservation. I was carrying Ada then. When she was born, I promised myself I would keep her safe, no matter what. But 3 days ago, I broke that promise. I left her alone in the desert. You hid her from men with guns, Matthew corrected gently. You made the choice you thought would save her life. That is not breaking a promise. That is being a mother. Onawa's eyes glistened with fresh tears. When I returned and she was gone, I wanted to die. I thought the coyotes had taken her, or that she had died from the heat. My father gathered the warriors and we searched everywhere. This morning, one of our scouts found tracks leading to your land. We prepared for the worst. But instead we found you. I am grateful you came when you did, Matthew said. I was running out of ways to care for her properly. She needs her mother. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear. Chief Nantage approached, carrying 2 bowls of food. He handed one to Matthew and one to Onawa. You will eat with us tonight, Matthew Young. It is the least we can offer. The meal was simple but delicious. Roasted rabbit, corn cakes, and some kind of stewed vegetables Matthew did not recognize. He ate with the tribe, sitting around their fire while they shared stories in Apache. Onawa translated some for him, tales of hunts and journeys, of ancestors and sacred places. As the night deepened, Matthew found himself drawn to Onawa's presence. She was strong in a way he had rarely seen, carrying herself with dignity despite the trauma she had recently endured. When she smiled, which was rare, it transformed her entire face. And when she looked at Ada, the love in her eyes was so profound it made Matthew's chest ache with a longing he had not felt in years. The tribe stayed for 3 days. During that time, Matthew learned more about the Apache than he had in his entire life. He learned about their complex social structures, their deep spiritual beliefs, and their desperate fight to maintain their way of life against an encroaching government that saw them as obstacles to be removed. He also learned about Onawa. She was a healer, trained by her grandmother in the use of plants and herbs for medicine. She was fiercely intelligent, speaking 3 languages fluently. She had been born during a winter storm, which was how she got her name, meaning wide awake, because she had emerged into the world with her eyes open, alert and aware. On the 2nd day, she showed him some of the plants she used for healing, teaching him which ones could reduce fever and which could help with infection. They walked his property together, Ada strapped to Onawa's back in a traditional cradle board, while she pointed out various plants and explained their uses. This land is good, she said, kneeling beside a cluster of purple flowers. It has strong medicine. The earth here is healthy. I have always felt that, Matthew admitted. When I first came here it felt right, like home. Onawa looked up at him. Home is not always a place, sometimes it is a feeling. On the 3rd day, Chief Nantage called Matthew to the fire. The tribe was preparing to leave, packing their camp with the efficiency of people who had done this countless times. We are grateful for what you have done, the chief said. You have shown honor and kindness. If you ever need help, you have friends among the Kairikahua Apache. Matthew nodded, feeling the weight of that friendship. I am honored. Onawa approached, Ada secure in her cradle board. She looked at Matthew with an expression he could not quite read. I do not want to leave, she said quietly. My daughter is healthy because of you. You gave her back her life. But more than that, in these 3 days, I have felt something I have not felt since my husband died. I have felt peace. "You are welcome here anytime," Matthew said, surprised by the intensity of his own emotion. "You and Ada both." Chief Nantage observed this exchange with knowing eyes. "Onawa, you are free to make your own choices. You always have been." She looked at her father, then back at Matthew. "Could I stay? For a while longer. I want to repay you by helping with your home. I can cook, clean, and help with the animals, and I can teach you more about the medicine plants." Matthew's heart raced. "You want to stay here, with me, if you will have us," Onawa said. "I know it is unusual, but nothing about our meeting has been usual." Matthew glanced at Chief Nantage, who gave a slight nod of approval. "I would be honored to have you both here." The tribe departed that afternoon, but Onawa and Ada remained. Chief Nantage promised to return in 2 months to check on his daughter, and the warriors left with assurances that Matthew would be under their protection. The first few days were awkward as they learned to navigate sharing space. Matthew gave Onawa his bedroom while he slept in the front room on a bedroll. She insisted on doing most of the cooking, and Matthew was amazed by the flavors she could coax from simple ingredients. She made bread in his fireplace that was the best he had ever tasted, and her stews were rich with herbs he had never thought to use. In return, Matthew taught her about the ranch operations. She learned how to milk the cow he kept, how to collect eggs from the chickens, and how to mend the fences that constantly needed repair. She was a quick learner, her hands skilled and sure. Ada thrived in the stability. She was a happy baby, quick to smile and curious about everything. Matthew found himself becoming attached to her in ways that surprised him. He would make faces to get her to laugh, and in the evenings, he would hold her while Onawa prepared dinner, telling her stories about the stars. 2 weeks after the tribe left, Matthew was working on fixing his barn roof when he slipped and fell, landing hard on his left arm. He heard the crack before he felt the pain, and then the agony hit him like a lightning strike. Onawa came running from the house, Ada on her hip, and immediately assessed the situation. "It is broken," she said, her face grave. "I need to set it." Matthew gritted his teeth against the pain. "Do what you need to do." She worked quickly and efficiently, sending him into the house and preparing a splint from wood and strips of cloth. "This will hurt," she warned, and then she pulled and twisted his arm with surprising strength. Matthew shouted in pain, but felt the bone shift back into place. She splinted it carefully, then gave him a tea made from willow bark for the pain. "You saved my life," he said when the worst of the pain had subsided to a dull throb. "If I had tried to set that myself, I would have crippled my arm forever." "Now we are even," Onawa said with a small smile. "You saved my daughter. I saved your arm. The debts are balanced." But Matthew did not feel that debts were what defined their relationship anymore. Over the following weeks, as his arm healed and she cared for him, he realized he was falling in love with her. It was not just her beauty, though she was beautiful. It was her strength, her intelligence, her fierce devotion to Ada, and the gentleness she showed to him when she thought he was not looking. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Ada asleep in Onawa's arms, Matthew gathered his courage. "I need to tell you something." Onawa turned to look at him, her dark eyes reflecting the orange light. "What is it?" "I've come to care for you deeply," Matthew said, his voice rough with emotion. "I know our worlds are different, and I know this is complicated, but I cannot keep pretending I do not feel this way. You have brought life to this place. You have brought life to me. I do not want you to leave when your father returns. I want you to stay, not as my employee or my guest, but as my partner, my equal." Onawa was quiet for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she shifted Ada in her arms and reached out to touch Matthew's face with her free hand. "I have been waiting for you to say something. I felt it too, but I was afraid. afraid you saw me only as the mother of the child you rescued, afraid that your kindness was obligation, not affection." "It is so much more than affection," Matthew said, covering her hand with his own good hand. "I love you, Onawa. I love you and Ada both. I want to build a life with you if you will have me." "I love you too," Onawa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I thought I would never feel this way again after Keel died. I thought my heart was buried with him. But you have shown me that the heart can heal, that it can love again. Yes, Matthew, I want to build a life with you." They sealed their promise with a kiss, tender and full of hope. Ada stirred between them but did not wake, as if sensing the importance of the moment and choosing not to interrupt. When Chief Nantage returned 2 months later, he came with fewer warriors but with his wife, a formidable woman named Liwanu. Onawa met them outside, standing beside Matthew, and announced their intention to marry. The chief studied Matthew for a long time. "You understand what this means. You will be tied to the Apache people. You will be one of us, and our struggles will become your struggles." "I understand," Matthew said firmly, "and I accept it. I love your daughter and Ada. I will protect them with my life." Liwanu stepped forward and examined Matthew with sharp eyes. Then she turned to Onawa and spoke in Apache. Onawa replied also in Apache, and the exchange went back and forth several times. Finally, Liwanu smiled and nodded. "She approves," Onawa told Matthew. "She says you have good eyes, honest eyes. She says Ada has grown strong under your care, and that is all a grandmother needs to know." They were married in a ceremony that blended Apache traditions with the white customs Matthew knew. Chief Nantage performed the Apache ritual, binding their hands with leather cord while speaking blessings in his native tongue. Then Matthew spoke the vows he had written himself, promising to honor and cherish Onawa for all his days. Onawa responded with her own vows, promising to stand beside him in good times and bad, to be his partner in all things. The tribe celebrated with them for 3 days, filling Matthew's small ranch with music and laughter. They roasted a deer, and the women taught Onawa traditional dances she had forgotten in the chaos of the recent years. Matthew found himself welcomed into their circle, taught some of their language and customs, treated not as an outsider but as family. When the tribe left again, Matthew and Onawa began their life together as husband and wife. The first year was not without challenges. There were whispers in Chloride about the white rancher who had married an Apache woman. Some people refused to do business with him, and there were a few tense encounters with men who made their disapproval known. But Matthew had never cared much for others' opinions. He focused on building his ranch and his family. With Onawa's help, the ranch prospered. She had an intuitive understanding of the land and the animals. Under her guidance, their cattle herd grew healthy and strong. She established a garden that produced vegetables year-round, using irrigation techniques her people had practiced for generations. Ada grew into a bright, curious toddler. She took her first steps in the front room of their home, wobbling between Matthew and Onawa while they cheered her on. Her first word was "Papa," directed at Matthew, and he wept with joy. Onawa smiled and said, "She knows who her father is." 2 years into their marriage, Onawa became pregnant. She announced it to Matthew one morning in early spring, and he was overwhelmed with emotion. "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "Happy does not begin to describe it," Matthew said, pulling her into his arms. "You have given me everything I never knew I needed, and now another child. I am blessed beyond measure." Their son was born in October of 1881, during the first cold snap of autumn. The birth was difficult, and Matthew spent hours pacing outside while Liwanu and 2 other Apache women attended to Onawa. When he finally heard his son's cry, He burst into the room to find Onawa exhausted but smiling, holding a squalling infant with a shock of black hair. "Meet Marcus," she said softly. "I thought we could give him your initial to honor you." Matthew cradled his son, marveling at the tiny, perfect features. Ada, now 3 years old, climbed onto the bed to peer at her baby brother with curiosity. "Baby," she pronounced solemnly, and everyone laughed. Life settled into a rhythm. Matthew expanded the ranch, building a larger house with separate rooms for the children. He brought in more cattle and started breeding horses, which proved profitable. Onawa's reputation as a healer spread, and people from surrounding ranches would sometimes come seeking her help, despite their prejudices. She treated everyone with the same care and skill, never turning anyone away, but the peace they had built was fragile. The government's policies toward the Apache grew increasingly aggressive. More tribes were being forced onto reservations, and there were rumors of forced relocations. Chief Nantage and his people were feeling the pressure. One night in 1882, the chief arrived at their ranch with grave news. "The army is coming. They say all Apache must report to the reservation at San Carlos. They say those who refuse will be hunted down." Onawa paled. "San Carlos is a death trap. The land is barren and there is disease. People are starving there." "I know," her father said heavily. "But we have little choice. If we run, they will kill us. If we fight, they will kill us. At least at San Carlos, some of us might survive." Matthew had been listening from the doorway. "How many are in your group?" 42, the chief replied. "Mostly women, children, and elders. Our warriors are few now. Many have died fighting or fled to Mexico." An idea began forming in Matthew's mind, crazy and dangerous but possibly workable. "What if you did not go to San Carlos? What if you stayed here?" Everyone stared at him. "What do you mean?" Onawa asked. "This ranch is nearly 300 acres, Matthew said, his words coming faster as the plan took shape. "Most of it is unused. There are valleys in the back where people could live unseen from the main road. If your people were willing to help work the ranch, we could say they are my employees." Mexican laborers and Apache workers are not uncommon on ranches. As long as they are not causing trouble, the government might leave them alone. Chief Nantage shook his head slowly. "It is too dangerous for you. If they discover what you are doing, they will arrest you. They might even hang you for harboring fugitives." "Then we will be careful," Matthew said. "But I cannot stand by and watch your people be sent to die on that reservation. Onawa is my wife. Ada and Marcus are your grandchildren. We are family. Family protects each other." Onawa looked at Matthew with such love and gratitude that it made his heart swell. "You would risk everything for my people, for our people," Matthew corrected. "When I married you, your people became mine. We are all in this together." The decision was made. Chief Nantage's group came to the ranch under cover of darkness. Matthew showed them the valley he had in mind, a sheltered area with a natural spring and plenty of grazing land. The Apache set up a hidden camp, building traditional wickiups that blended into the landscape. From the main road, the camp was invisible. Matthew registered many of them as ranch workers with the territorial government, claiming he had hired them to help with his expanding cattle operation. It was not entirely a lie. The Apache did help with the ranch work, and they were excellent at it. The cattle thrived under their care, and the horses they trained were some of the finest in the territory. But maintaining the secret required constant vigilance. Matthew built a system of signals to warn the camp if strangers were approaching. Onawa taught Ada and Marcus to never speak about the people living in the valley. The children understood, in the way children do when something is serious, that keeping the secret kept everyone safe. For 3 years, the arrangement worked. The ranch became more successful than Matthew had ever imagined. He hired a few white ranch hands who were sympathetic to the Apache, men who could be trusted to keep the secret. The community they built was unique, a blend of cultures working together for survival. Onawa became pregnant again in 1884, and this time, the pregnancy was easier. She gave birth to twin girls in the spring of 1885, two healthy babies with their father's blue-gray eyes and their mother's black hair. They named them Rose and Lily, simple American names that would help them navigate the white world, while honoring their mother's love of the flowers she had planted around their home. Ada, now 7, took to being a big sister with enthusiasm. She would help feed the twins and sing to them in Apache, songs Onawa had taught her. Marcus, at 4, was less interested in babies and more interested in following the Apache men around, learning to track animals and identify plants. The peace lasted until October of 1885, when a cavalry patrol came to the ranch unannounced. Matthew was in the barn when they arrived, and one of the ranch hands ran to warn him. He walked out to meet them, his heart pounding but his face calm. The captain in charge was a young man named Lieutenant Harrison, fresh-faced and eager. "Mr. Young, we have received reports of Apache in this area. Have you seen any?" "I have some Apache working for me," Matthew said truthfully. "Registered with the territory as employees. They help with the cattle and horses." "We need to inspect your property," Harrison said, not unkindly but firmly. "Orders from the colonel." Matthew's mind raced. If they found the hidden camp, everyone would be arrested or worse. "Of course, but I need to accompany you. Some of the cattle in the back valleys can be aggressive if strangers approach." As he led the patrol around his property, Matthew made sure to steer them away from the hidden camp. He showed them the registered workers, who were prepared for such inspections and had their papers ready. The lieutenant examined everything carefully but found nothing amiss. They were about to leave when one of the soldiers spotted smoke rising from the direction of the hidden valley. "Sir, there is a fire over that ridge." Matthew's blood ran cold. "That is probably one of my hands burning brush. We have been clearing some land." "We should check it," Harrison said, spurring his horse forward. There was no way to stop them without raising suspicion. Matthew rode alongside, his mind frantically searching for a solution. As they crested the ridge, the Wickiup camp came into view. Women and children scattered at the sight of the soldiers, and the few warriors present stood their ground, though they were unarmed. Harrison's face hardened. "Mr. Young, these people are not registered workers. This is an illegal camp." Chief Nantage stepped forward, his bearing dignified despite the circumstances. "We are peaceful, we work the land, we harm no one." "That does not matter," Harrison said, though Matthew could hear regret in his voice. "The law says all Apache must report to the reservation. You are in violation." Matthew rode between the soldiers and the Apache. "Lieutenant, these people have been here for 3 years. They have committed no crimes. They have only tried to survive. I understand your sympathy, Mr. Young, but I have my orders. These people must be taken to San Carlos, and you will be arrested for harboring them." Onawa appeared from the house, having heard the commotion. She rode up with Ada beside her, both of them looking terrified. "Please," Onawa said to Harrison. "These people include my father, my mother, my cousins. We are not warriors, we are just trying to live." Harrison looked at Onawa, at Ada, then at Matthew. For a moment, something shifted in his expression. "You are Mrs. Young." "I am," Onawa said proudly. "And these are your relatives." "They are." Harrison was quiet for a long moment, the other soldiers waiting for his orders. Finally, he sighed. "Mr. Young, do you have registration papers for these workers?" Matthew understood what Harrison was offering. "I have papers for 20. The others are family members visiting. They are not permanent residents. Then I suggest you get papers for all of them immediately, Harrison said. And I suggest those who are visiting return to wherever they came from officially before another patrol comes through. Thank you, Lieutenant, Matthew said, hardly believing what he was hearing. Harrison looked at his men. I saw nothing here but registered ranch workers and some visiting family. Is that understood? The soldiers nodded, some of them looking relieved. Harrison turned his horse. Get those papers filed, Mr. Young, and be more careful. Not every officer will be as willing to look the other way. After the soldiers left, Chief Nantage approached Matthew and Onawa. He gave us a gift, but it is a temporary one. The Army will not ignore us forever. Then we need to make this official, Matthew said. We need to make this ranch a legitimate settlement. If we file as a small town with the territory, with these people as registered residents, it will be harder for the Army to force anyone to leave. Over the following months, that is exactly what they did. Matthew worked with a sympathetic lawyer in Santa Fe to establish a legal framework for what they were building. They registered the settlement as Young Ranch Township, with Matthew as the founder and the Apache residents as legal inhabitants. It required bribes, favors, and careful navigation of bureaucratic systems, but by the spring of 1886, they had official recognition. The township thrived. More Apache fleeing the harsh conditions of the reservations found their way to Matthew's land, and each time they went through the proper legal channels to register them. The ranch became known as a place where Apache and white settlers lived together in peace, an oddity that attracted attention from newspapers and reformers interested in alternative approaches to the Indian problem. That attention was both blessing and curse. It protected them from casual military harassment, but it also made them a target for those who opposed any policy but complete subjugation. Matthew received threats, and there were occasional acts of vandalism. But the community stood strong, united by the bonds they had forged. On a cool evening in November of 1887, Matthew sat on his porch with Onawa beside him, watching their children play in the yard. Ada was 9 now, tall and graceful like her mother, helping Marcus build a corral for his toy horses. The twins, Rose and Lily, were toddling around under the watchful eye of Liwanu, who had proven to be a devoted grandmother. You ever regret it? Onawa asked quietly. Taking us in, fighting these battles. Matthew took her hand, weathered from work but still strong. Not for a single moment. You are my life, Onawa. You and these children and the community we have built. I was half alive before I found Ada that day. You brought me back to life. You did the same for me, Onawa said, leaning her head on his shoulder. I thought my life was over when Keel died. I thought I would live in anger and grief forever. But you showed me that love could bloom even in the hardest soil, that peace was possible even in times of war. They sat in comfortable silence as the sun set, painting the New Mexico sky in brilliant colors. Chief Nantage approached, moving slower now as age caught up with him, but still strong. The council has made a decision, he said. We want to make this official in our way as well. Tomorrow night we will hold a ceremony to formally adopt you into the tribe, Matthew. You will become one of us, not just in marriage but in spirit. Matthew was deeply moved. I am honored beyond words. The ceremony the next night was one of the most profound experiences of Matthew's life. The entire community gathered around a large fire in the hidden valley. Chief Nantage led the ritual, speaking in Apache while Onawa translated. Matthew was given a new name, Nashoba, which meant wolf, symbolizing his loyalty and protective nature. He was marked with traditional symbols and presented with a feather from a golden eagle. a sacred bird representing courage and wisdom. As he stood before the tribe, now his tribe, Matthew felt a sense of belonging he had never experienced before. These people had accepted him fully, trusting him with their lives and their futures. It was a responsibility he would carry with honor for the rest of his days. Life continued its rhythm through the seasons. The children grew strong and healthy, learning both Apache and white American ways. Ada proved to have her mother's gift for healing and spent hours learning the medicinal properties of plants. Marcus was a natural horseman, able to gentle even the wildest horses with patience and kindness. The twins were inseparable, finishing each other's sentences and communicating in a language that seemed all their own. In 1889, Onawa became pregnant for the fourth time. She was 33 now, and the pregnancy was harder on her body. Matthew worried constantly, but she remained calm and confident. "My body knows what to do," she assured him. "Women in my family have been having babies for generations. I am strong." The baby, another boy, was born in March of 1890. They named him Daniel, and he came into the world screaming with such vigor that everyone laughed in relief. He had Matthew's light hair and Onawa's dark eyes, a perfect blend of both worlds. The ranch township continued to grow. They built a school where children learned both English and Apache, both white history and tribal traditions. They established a trading post that drew customers from surrounding ranches, curious about the unique goods offered there. Onawa's medicinal tinctures became particularly popular, and Matthew was amused to see the same people who had once shunned them now coming to seek her remedies. But the world beyond their sanctuary was changing. The frontier was closing, the Wild West giving way to a more settled society. Railroads cut through traditional tribal lands, and the government's policies toward native peoples remained harsh. Matthew and Onawa followed the news with heavy hearts, knowing that they had created a rare pocket of peace in a landscape of ongoing conflict. In 1891, Chief Nantage fell ill. Despite Onawa's best efforts, his body was worn out from a lifetime of struggle. He died peacefully in his sleep, surrounded by family. The loss hit the community hard. He had been their leader, their anchor, their guide through impossible times. At the funeral, held in the Apache tradition, Matthew spoke about the chief. "Nantage was a man of wisdom and courage. He chose to trust me when he had every reason not to. He taught me about honor, about family, about what it means to fight for what is right. I will carry his teachings for the rest of my life, and I will tell my children and grandchildren about the great man who became my father." Onawa wept in Matthew's arms, grieving for her father but grateful that he had lived to see his grandchildren grow. He had died knowing that his people were safe, that they had found a place where they could live with dignity. That knowledge brought comfort in the midst of sorrow. The community voted to make Matthew the new leader of the township, though he insisted on sharing that leadership with the tribal elders. He was not trying to replace Nantage, but to continue his legacy. Together, they governed the settlement with fairness and wisdom, making decisions that benefited everyone. Years passed in a blur of hard work and quiet joy. Ada grew into a beautiful young woman, her reputation as a healer eventually surpassing even her mother's. Young men from both Apache and white communities sought her attention, but she was particular, waiting for someone who understood both sides of her heritage. When she was 21, she married a Mexican rancher named Rafael who had grown up on the border between cultures, just as she had. Their wedding was a grand celebration that brought together people from all backgrounds. Marcus became a renowned horse trainer, his skills sought after by ranches across the territory. He married an Apache woman named Dawa from another peaceful settlement, and they built their home near Matthew and Onawa's house, continuing the family tradition. The twins, Rose and Lily, surprised everyone by becoming businesswomen. They took over the trading post and expanded it into a successful general store that served the entire region. They never married, preferring to focus on their business and each other's company, and no one in the family questioned their choice. Daniel, the youngest, inherited his father's love of ranching. From an early age, he could be found helping with the cattle, mending fences, and planning improvements to the land. He was quiet and thoughtful, with a gift for seeing solutions that others missed. In 1900, as the new century dawned, Matthew and Onawa celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary. The celebration was held in the township center, with hundreds of people attending. The community they had helped build was now home to over 200 people, a thriving settlement that existed as a testament to what was possible when people chose cooperation over conflict. During the celebration, their children and grandchildren presented them with gifts. Ada gave them a book she had written documenting traditional Apache medicinal practices, ensuring that knowledge would be preserved. Marcus presented them with 2 beautiful horses bred from their original stock. The twins gave them a photograph album filled with images of the family over the years. Daniel gifted them a hand-carved sign for the ranch entrance, reading "Young Ranch Township, where all are welcome." As Matthew and Onawa stood together, surrounded by the family and community they had built, they reflected on the journey that had brought them there. It had started with a baby's cry in the desert, a moment of choice that had changed everything. From that single act of kindness, an entire world had grown. "I still remember the day I found Ada," Matthew said to the gathered crowd. "I thought I was alone in this world, that my life would be nothing but hard work and solitude. But that day changed everything. That day brought me Onawa, brought me all of you, brought me a purpose beyond my own survival. I learned that the greatest treasures are often found in the most unexpected places." Onawa took his hand, her eyes bright with tears of joy. "You gave my daughter back to me when I thought she was lost forever. But more than that, you gave me hope. You gave all of us hope. You showed us that peace was possible, that people from different worlds could build something beautiful together. I am proud to be your wife, proud to have raised our children with you, proud of what we have created together." They kissed while their family and friends cheered, the sound of celebration echoing across the land that had become their shared home. The years that followed were gentle ones. Matthew and Onawa grew old together, their bodies slowing but their spirits remaining vibrant. They spent their days watching their grandchildren play, working in Onawa's garden, and sitting on the porch they had shared for so many years. In the mornings, Matthew would still ride out to check on the cattle, though now Daniel or one of his grandsons usually accompanied him. Onawa continued her healing work, though she focused on teaching younger apprentices, passing on her knowledge to ensure it would not be lost. They saw the world change around them. The Wild West of their youth faded into history, replaced by automobiles, telephones, and electric lights. New Mexico achieved statehood in 1912, and their township was officially recognized as part of the new state's fabric. The struggles of the past did not disappear, but they evolved, and the community Matthew and Onawa had built remained a beacon of possibility. On a spring morning in 1915, as blossoms filled the trees Onawa had planted decades earlier, Matthew woke to find his wife sleeping peacefully beside him. They were both in their 60s now, their hair silver, their faces lined with the marks of a life well lived. He watched her breathe, feeling overwhelming gratitude for every day they had been given. Onawa stirred and opened her eyes, smiling when she saw him watching her. "Good morning, my love." "Good morning," Matthew replied, kissing her gently. "I was just thinking about how lucky I am." "We are both lucky," Onawa said. "We found each other when we needed each other most. We built a life together that has blessed so many people. What more could anyone ask for?" They rose and went through their morning routine, moving with the comfortable synchronization of people who had spent decades together. After breakfast, they walked through the township, greeting neighbors and checking on the various businesses and homes. Children ran past, a mix of Apache, white, and Mexican heritage, playing together without any thought to the differences that had once divided their ancestors. "We did it," Onawa said softly as they stood on a hill overlooking the settlement. "We created something that will last beyond us." "We did," Matthew agreed, pulling her close. "And I would not change a single moment of it." Ada came to visit that afternoon, bringing her 3 children. She had inherited her grandmother's role as the family matriarch, holding everyone together with her warmth and wisdom. As she prepared tea, she asked her parents about their early days together, wanting to record their story for future generations. Matthew and Onawa told the tale they had told many times before, but it never grew old. They spoke of the baby crying in the desert, of the tribe arriving with weapons and fear, of the choice to help rather than hide, of the love that had bloomed in the most unlikely circumstances. "Your father saved my life," Onawa said, looking at Ada, "and he saved yours. But more than that, he showed us all that a different way was possible. That love could bridge any divide. That family was not just blood but choice. That home was something you built together. And your mother taught me what it means to be truly brave," Matthew added. "She faced impossible choices and made them with grace and courage. She brought life and healing wherever she went. She turned a lonely ranch into a thriving community. Everything good in my life came from the day I found Ada in the desert, because that day led me to Onawa." Ada wiped tears from her eyes. "I am honored to be your daughter, to be the reason your paths crossed, to have grown up in the world you created." As the sun set that evening, Matthew and Onawa sat on their beloved porch one more time. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the township, each living their own lives but always connected by the bonds of family and community. The land stretched out before them, peaceful and productive, a testament to years of hard work and love. "Do you remember what you said to me the night we decided to marry?" Onawa asked, her hand in Matthew's. "I told you I loved you and Ada," Matthew recalled. "That I wanted to build a life with you." "You said you wanted to build a life," Onawa repeated, "and look at what we built. Not just a life, but a legacy. Not just a home, but a sanctuary. Not just a family, but a community. You kept your promise, Matthew Young. You kept it every single day." "We kept it together," Matthew said. "Everything we accomplished as partners. I could not have done any of it without you." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars emerged, the same stars they had watched together for nearly 40 years. The night air was cool and filled with the sounds of the desert. Coyotes calling in the distance, the wind whispering through the cottonwood trees, the gentle lowing of cattle settling for the night. In the house behind them, they could hear the sounds of family gathering for dinner. Daniel was cooking, having insisted his parents rest for the evening. Grandchildren's laughter rang out, mingling with adult conversation and the clatter of dishes. "Come inside," Ada called from the door. "Dinner is ready and everyone is here." Matthew and Onawa rose from their chairs, moving slowly but with the contentment of people who had lived fully and loved deeply. They walked into the warm house, surrounded by the family they had created together, the community they had nurtured, the legacy they would leave behind. As they sat at the head of the long table, Surrounded by children and grandchildren and extended family members, Matthew offered a blessing. "We are grateful for this food, for this family, for this life we have been privileged to share. May we always remember that love is stronger than fear, that kindness is more powerful than hatred, and that home is anywhere we choose to build it together." "Amen," the family chorused, and the meal began. Years continued to pass peacefully. Matthew and Onawa lived to see their great-grandchildren born, tiny new lives carrying their legacy forward. They celebrated as the township continued to grow and prosper, as new families joined and old families expanded. They witnessed progress and change, always adapting but never losing sight of the principles that had guided them from the beginning. In 1920, when Matthew was 70 years old and Onawa was 66, they received news that the state of New Mexico was planning to honor their township as an example of successful integration and cooperation. A ceremony was planned, with government officials and newspaper reporters invited to see what they had built. On the day of the ceremony, Matthew and Onawa dressed in their finest clothes. Matthew wore a suit, his silver hair neatly combed, and Onawa wore a beautiful dress that combined traditional Apache beadwork with modern styling. Together, they represented the fusion of cultures that had made their community unique. The governor gave a speech praising their vision and accomplishments. Reporters took photographs and interviewed community members. But the moment Matthew treasured most came when a young Apache boy, no more than 7 years old, approached him shyly. "Sir," the boy said, "my grandmother told me that you are the reason we can live here safely, that you protected us when others wanted to hurt us. Is that true?" Matthew knelt down to the boy's level. "Your grandmother is very kind, but the truth is more complicated. Yes, I helped where I could. But your people are the ones who built this place with their hard work and wisdom. Your ancestors were strong and brave. I just had the privilege of standing beside them." The boy thought about this for a moment. "My teacher says we should always be kind to others, even when it is hard. She says you taught us that." "Your teacher is wise," Matthew said. "Yes, kindness is always the right choice, even when it is difficult, especially when it is difficult. That is how we build a better world." The boy smiled and ran back to his family, and Matthew felt a profound sense of satisfaction. The lessons they had tried to teach were being passed on to new generations. The cycle of understanding and compassion would continue. As the ceremony concluded and the officials departed, the township threw a celebration of their own. There was music and dancing, traditional Apache songs alongside American folk tunes. Food tables groaned under the weight of dishes representing multiple cultures. Apache fry bread, Mexican tamales, American apple pie, all shared freely among friends and neighbors. Matthew and Onawa danced together, their movements slow but graceful, their love as evident as it had been in their youth. Their children and grandchildren formed a circle around them, clapping and cheering, celebrating not just this moment but the entire journey that had led them here. "I love you," Matthew whispered to Onawa as they swayed to the music. "I have loved you from the moment you rode up to my ranch, desperate and afraid and so incredibly strong. I will love you until my last breath and beyond." "And I love you," Onawa replied. "You are my heart, my home, my everything. The day I lost Ada in the desert, I thought the world was ending, but it was actually beginning. Because losing her led me to you, and together we found more than I ever dreamed possible." The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually, Matthew and Onawa retired to their bedroom. They lay together in the darkness, hands clasped, listening to the distant sounds of music and laughter. "We should probably rest," Onawa murmured. "We are not as young as we once were." Rest sounds good, Matthew agreed. But first, tell me, if you could go back to that day when you hid Ada in the desert, knowing everything that would happen after, would you change anything? Onawa was quiet for a moment, thinking. The terror of that day will never leave me. The fear that I had lost my daughter was the worst thing I have ever felt, but it led to this life, this family, this community. So no, I would not change anything. Sometimes our darkest moments lead us to our greatest blessings. That is a wise answer, Matthew said, and I feel the same. Every hardship, every struggle, every moment of doubt and fear, they were all necessary to bring us to where we are now. I would go through it all again, exactly as it happened, because it gave me you. They fell asleep in each other's arms, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful that would outlast them both. Matthew and Onawa lived several more years together, watching their family continue to grow and their township continue to thrive. They spent their final years in quiet contentment, each day a gift they cherished deeply. When Matthew passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1925 at the age of 75, the entire township mourned. He was laid to rest on the hill overlooking the settlement he had helped build. Under a cottonwood tree, he and Onawa had planted together 50 years earlier. The funeral was attended by hundreds, people whose lives had been touched by his kindness, his vision, and his unwavering commitment to doing what was right. Onawa stood at his graveside, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and spoke of the man she had loved for 47 years. Matthew Young was a simple rancher who made a choice that changed hundreds of lives. He chose kindness over indifference. He chose love over fear. He chose to see people as individuals worthy of dignity and respect, not as threats or problems to be solved. He was my husband, my partner, my best friend. He was a father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. He was a leader, a teacher, and a beacon of hope. And he was, quite simply, the best man I have ever known. Onawa lived for 5 more years after Matthew's death. She spent that time finishing the work they had started together, ensuring the township had a solid legal and economic foundation that would carry it into the future. She wrote down her medicinal knowledge in detailed journals, creating a comprehensive guide that would preserve centuries of Apache healing traditions. She told stories to her great-grandchildren about the old days, about their grandfather Matthew, about the journey that had brought them all together. In the spring of 1930, as flowers bloomed in the garden she had tended for half a century, Onawa passed away peacefully, surrounded by her family. She was 76 years old. Her last words were, "Tell Matthew I am coming home." She was buried beside Matthew under the cottonwood tree, and the entire state of New Mexico mourned the passing of a woman who had become a legend. Newspapers ran stories about her life, about the remarkable partnership she had shared with her husband, about the community they had built together. Their children and grandchildren continued the work Matthew and Onawa had started. Ada became a renowned healer whose medical texts were used to train doctors across the Southwest. Marcus's horse breeding program produced some of the finest animals in the country. The twins' business expanded into a chain of stores that provided fair employment and quality goods. Daniel took over management of the ranch, expanding it while maintaining the inclusive principles his parents had established. The township of Young Ranch continued to grow and prosper through the decades. It weathered the Great Depression by pulling together as a community, sharing resources and supporting each other. During World War II, young men from the settlement served with distinction, representing both Apache and white heritage. The civil rights movement of the 1960s found the township already practicing the equality that others were still fighting for. Through all the changes, The story of Matthew and Onawa remained central to the community's identity. Their graves on the hill became a place of pilgrimage, where young couples would come to exchange vows, where children would come to hear stories of the past, where anyone facing difficult decisions would come to draw inspiration from two people who had chosen love when hate would have been easier. The baby that Matthew found crying in the desert in 1878 grew up to become a remarkable healer who saved countless lives. Ada lived to be 93 years old, passing away in 1971, surrounded by a family that numbered in the dozens. Before she died, she wrote a memoir about her mother and father, titled Found and Raised, the story of two worlds becoming one. The book became a bestseller, introducing millions of people to the remarkable true story of Matthew Young and Onawa Whitehorse. In that memoir, Ada wrote about her earliest memory, something she claimed to remember though it seemed impossible given her age at the time. She wrote, "I remember the heat of the desert sun and the terror of being alone. I remember my mother's face as she hid me, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered that she would return for me. And I remember strong, gentle hands lifting me, a kind voice speaking words I did not understand but whose tone conveyed safety and love. That was the day my father found me. That was the day our family began." The ranch that Matthew established in 1873 remained in the Young family for generations. The modest adobe house he built with his own hands was preserved as a historical landmark, carefully maintained to show visitors what life was like in those early days. The larger house he and Onawa built for their growing family became a museum, filled with artifacts from their lives. Onawa's medicine journal, Matthew's ranch ledgers, photographs of the community through the decades, letters exchanged between family members, and objects that told the story of two cultures learning to live together in harmony. The hidden valley where Chief Nantage's people first camped was turned into a cultural center, teaching visitors about Apache traditions and history. It became a living classroom where traditional skills like basket weaving, hide tanning, and medicinal plant identification were taught to new generations determined not to lose their heritage. The general store that Rose and Lily established evolved into a cooperative that provided economic opportunities for hundreds of families. The horse breeding program Marcus started became an internationally recognized operation, with young ranch horses prized for their intelligence, endurance, and gentle temperament. The healing traditions Onawa practiced and recorded influenced the development of ethnobotany as a scientific field, with researchers coming from around the world to study the plants of the region and their medicinal properties. But beyond all the tangible legacies, the greatest gift Matthew and Onawa left was the example of their love. They had proven that people from different worlds could not only coexist, but could thrive together. They had shown that compassion was stronger than prejudice, that understanding could bridge any divide, and that family was defined not by blood alone, but by the bonds of choice and commitment. Their story was taught in schools across New Mexico as an example of the state's rich multicultural heritage. It inspired legislation protecting indigenous rights. It became the subject of films, plays, and songs. Most importantly, it continued to inspire individuals to choose kindness, to see beyond surface differences, and to believe in the possibility of building something beautiful even in the midst of conflict and hardship. On the centennial anniversary of the day Matthew found Ada in the desert, the state of New Mexico declared August 15th as Young Day, a celebration of unity and compassion. Every year on that date, people gather at Young Ranch Township for a festival that honors the legacy of Matthew and Onawa. There is music and food, storytelling and dancing, ceremonies in both Apache and English. Young couples come to be married under the cottonwood tree where Matthew and Onawa rest. Parents bring children to teach them about their heritage and the power of making good choices. Elders share memories passed down through generations about the remarkable couple who changed so many lives. The story of Matthew Young and Onawa Whitehorse is ultimately a story of hope. It is a reminder that in a world often divided by fear and hatred, love can flourish if given the chance. That a single choice to help someone in need can ripple forward through generations. That the hardest times can lead to the greatest blessings. That family is what you build together, not what you are born into. And that true strength lies not in weapons or power, but in compassion, integrity, and the courage to do what is right even when it is difficult. Their love story began with a baby's cry in the desert and grew into a legacy that transformed a corner of the American Southwest. Matthew, the lonely rancher who chose kindness, and Onawa, the desperate mother whose courage saved her people, found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something that would last far beyond their own lifetimes. Together, they proved that love could bridge any divide, that peace was possible even in times of war, and that home was not a place, but a feeling you created together with the people you chose to keep close to your heart.